r/AskReddit. When someone close to you loses a loved one, what's better to say than I'm sorry? Please subscribe, leave a like, comment and share the video to help the channel. Hundreds of people came to my grandpa's visitation. The I'm sorry S, and he was a great guy S all ran together after a few hours. Two comments stuck out to me when it was over. Both were from people who told a specific story about him, some way he had touched their lives, previously unbeknownst to me. I realized the two women who did this had recently lost family members of their own, so I figured they knew from experience what would be most helpful to say. Now when I go to a visitation, I try to come up with a favorite memory of the deceased to share with their loved ones. Bonus points if it's a new story, something the mourners wouldn't have known about. When coming to terms with a death, it's heartening to realize you can still learn new things about the person you've lost. Some people hate this, and it's understandable, but the most comforting thing I was told after losing my dad was, it's just going to suck for a while. After tolerating mountains of, I'm so sorry, I know how you feel, God is watching over him now, blababbity blah etc. I thought I was going to snap all over again. A dear friend held me close and told me, it's just going to suck for a while. Life will suck for a while, but it's going to pass, come back, pass, and come back again over and over. It'll never stop entirely hurting. I cried harder than I had since he was diagnosed, but they were tears of relief and release. Her words still comfort me almost 3 years later, but I know for a fact not everyone would appreciate it. I suppose those words are just good if you know your loved one has a disdain for repetitive pleasantries and religious explanations. Sometimes saying nothing at all and just sitting near them in silence so that they know they aren't alone is better than saying anything. The best thing is to listen instead of trying to think of the perfect words to make it better. My best friend lost her dad a few years back. I just said, I'm not going to say anything because it will sound stupid and pointless, and just sat with her. She agreed and thanked me because people were saying the typical things and it was really starting to irk her. Told her my phone was on and she could call me anytime. Sadly, at 31, I have lost my mother in 2008, my 2-year-old daughter in 2016, and my sister in 2018. If you're talking about at funerals, family gatherings etc., it doesn't matter too much. It's just a long blurry dreamlike state for a lot of people. They also know that you probably don't know what to say. They don't either. Don't be afraid to bring up good times. It hurts but it's also healing. Don't say they're in a better place you'll meet again, they are always with you, that shit gets old fast. I get why people say it, but nobody is ready for that shit at funerals. All they want is that person back. Save that for another day. Just say it from the heart. More often than not, at the very least, you'll get an E for effort. I know she meant well, I think. But when I lost my dad not even a week later, my sister-in-law phoned me so excited, told me she was going to a psychic. She asked me if I had any questions she wanted me to ask my father. So yes please, don't do that lol. We are two strangers on the internet. Regardless of that, I wanted to say I've had a similar experience. All I can say and all I feel I need to say is that I understand. Take care of yourself as best you can. I'm a big believer in feeding the grieving. Losing someone, especially suddenly, is a huge shock to most people, and they find it hard to eat. There's not much to say that will make it better, but acts of service, such as giving them food, cleaning their apartment if they are too depressed, or even just taking their car to refill their gas tank, can help a lot when someone's in that frame of mind. However, I will note this. When I miscarried, a nurse came into the room and said, I know that nothing I can say will make this better, but I'd like to give you a hug. I have lost many people in my life, and that was the best response to my grief I have ever experienced. If I may add to your advice about food, bring something a week or two after the loss. My family was inundated with meals right away, but none of us could eat, and a lot went to waste. If you want to bring something right away, bring something for the family's many visitors. My cousins brought cases of soda, paper cups/plates, and bags of chips. It really helped. Depending on the loss, consider showing up months later. all of the good intentions and expressed, "I'll be there for you, whatever you need," and everything else disappeared a few months after my wife died. Finally surfacing out of grief after a year or so, and finding nobody left feels like shit. And there's a reason most younger, like 65 or so, widows and widowers end up having a completely different set of friends a few years later. As a widower, I didn't want any of the squash lasagna or gluten-free this or vegan that which people were offering in the first few weeks. I would have killed for a non-judgmental friend who just wanted to get a beer and hang out a couple years later. But they were all gone. When my dad passed, my mom was not a mess. In fact, she stoically took over the family business and learned to run it. She seemed to be doing okay until I moved back home. A big chunk of her friends stopped talking to her. My dad's side doesn't really talk to her, and I could hear her crying every night. I had planned on living at home for 3 months and getting my own place, but I ended up stayed for 18 months. She needed me. She needed someone to fuss over. She needed someone to make sure she was eating real food. She needed a distraction. So I stayed until she told me she thought it was a good idea to get an apartment with my then boyfriend, now husband. I've been out of my childhood home now for 3 years, but I still drop in once a week for a glass of wine and a chat. Honestly, I believe that usually nurses in general don't get commended enough for the work they do. They have to take care of people who can't take care of themselves. They go through a lot, because when someone dies in their care it really hurts, and some of them go the extra mile and do amazing things that they maybe didn't have to do, but did it out of kindness. I'm a nurse. Just wanted to say thank you. Fortunately, I've only lost one patient who had cancer everywhere, so while expected, it wasn't expected on my shift. It's traumatic to deal with finding someone dead, trying to revive them, and be unsuccessful. And on top of that then go to your other patient's room and have to act normal. Loss sucks no matter how it affects you. I also lost my mom at a young age, all of my grandparents, and a sweet little 4-year-old I became very close with. It doesn't get easier. There's not a single thing people can say that will make it better. I usually say that to people. I know there is nothing I could ever say that will help with the loss you're dealing with. I want you to know I'm here for you whenever you need someone to talk to or just someone to sit in silence with. I also will offer to bring over food, pick up groceries or clean, etc. to try and take the burden of everyday tasks. Sometimes you're so caught up in grief you forget to eat. When my daughter was stillborn, my wife at the time and I were in absolute shock. Not only was it a difficult pregnancy, and she was in the hospital for nearly a month prior, but the main doctor kept assuring us everything was fine. On the day when we were packing up her stuff, the paperwork was endless. It just kept coming, and they told me I had to sign it all before we could be released. Finally a nurse came in and slipped me another form. She was with us through a lot of that month. She just whispered, "This will help." It was a form to apply for medical assistance. Our nearly 500,000 bill went down to like 10 grand after we were approved. We would have never found out about that program without her help. When my parents passed, 12 days apart, I heard all the platitudes to the point I could blow chunks. A high school friend simply said "I'm sorry," and I found that to be the most impactful thing said to me. The son of a family friend was shot and killed at a party just before Christmas many years ago. I told her that I knew damn well that there was no way I could understand what she was going through, so I wouldn't try to offer advice, but I would be there to help with things she needed to get done. Over the following couple days, I drove her around town, such as to and from the police station and to make arrangements for his body. She later told me that that meant more to her than anything anyone else had said to her. She was sick of hearing "I'm so sorry" or platitudes about what a great guy he was, and said that me treating her semi-normally, I wouldn't crack lame jokes to lighten the mood like I normally would, and just being there to help without all the bullshit condolences was what helped her the most those few days. I faced this yesterday. My partner found out his friend he'd known for over 10 years passed unexpectedly. I continued to say "I'm sorry," but I also scratched and massaged his head, his favorite thing, and mostly stayed quiet. Offer to bring them food. One of the more difficult things to do during the initial stages of mourning is to eat properly. The closer the mourner is to the deceased, the harder that is, because a series of important decisions have to be made in great haste, such as organ donation and funeral arrangements and memorial services. The rest of life doesn't slow down in the meantime. Then there's the will, or the lack of one, and the quest for important documents. There's going through personal belongings and arranging an estate sale. The less organized the deceased was, the more daunting that gets. Wedding rings and rare childhood photos turn up among unopened mail. Long dormant storage lockers contain a pile of garbage with a valuable vintage science fiction collection in the corner. Then, as often as not, there's at least one relative who tries to steal an inheritance, while another is an overgrown child who tries to make the funeral all about themselves. It's exhausting. Tangible assistance is often sorely needed, and home-cooked food is the safest option, because it's one of the things that falls by the wayside during that crush. Everybody is going to say to them, "Let me know what I can do for you." But the person will never ask for anything. Instead, make some suggestions. Say things like, "I'd like to bring over some food. Is there anything you are allergic to? I know a great house cleaning service that owes me a favor. What would be a good time for them to come by? You could use some me time. When you're ready, here's a pass for a mani, PD and spa." The grieving person probably has no idea what they want or what they need, and it's just one more decision to make when you are already overwhelmed. It's so much better to offer something concrete like food, babysitting if the bereaved has children, a coffee date, etc. Then the only decision the person has to make is, do I want this thing now? And don't be offended if they say no, or not right now. Everyone needs something different at different times. I would also add that grief lasts a long ass time. So don't forget about the person a few months after the loss. Grief often hits hard a few months later, and that's about when everybody else forgets about it and moves on. My grief was worst about a year after my mother died, but by then everyone kind of thought I should be over it, and it made the process that much more lonely. Please subscribe, leave a like, comment and share the video to help the channel.